Hey, hi, hello. Welcome to Diana Emerson today. We're listening
January
to
22nd,
the chilling
2023,
case
a
of
garbage recycler was brought into
Valentina.
a dumpster and found a suitcase with the
Valentina, I'll
lifeless
stop
body of a
right
girl
there.
inside the suitcase. Her head was on the outside. The terrified man immediately reported it to the police. All this happened in the city of Bogota, Colombia. It turned out that it was 23-year-old model and DJ Valentina Tres Palacios. Police officers took up the case and began to look into her life in more detail. Valentina was a promising DJ in Bogota, gaining recognition in the Colombian dance genre known as guaracha. Valentina was also a student at Unimpahu University of Social Development. She has performed in clubs in Colombia and abroad. In 2019, she won the DJ of the Year award at the Columbia Awards. She worked very hard and had a very promising future. She performed all over the country in the best nightclubs. She also traveled to many parts of South America. Her rise to musical fame took a tragic turn after she met 35-year-old American John Nelson Poulos, with whom she was living together. The couple had been in a romantic relationship for over a year. They met in January 2022 through the dating app Tinder. John was fascinated by Valentina's beauty and wrote to her. They began to correspond. John didn't know Spanish well, and Valentina didn't know English well, but that didn't stop John. He communicated with her through a translator, and John wanted more. He traveled to Colombia and met with her. Valentina was even more beautiful in person, and John decided he would pursue her. He courted her, and eventually was able to get her to reciprocate. It was a long-distance relationship. John lived in two countries. He had a job in the U.S., and often flew there on work-related business, and spent the rest of his time in Colombia with Valentina. John had promised Valentina that he would marry her. He wanted to start a family with her, but she was too young and had no plans for marriage. Those close to Valentina said that John was insanely jealous, obsessive, and controlled her every move. The couple often quarreled, so Valentina's family and friends did not like him. This information interested investigators, and they began to find out who he was and look closely at the man. It turned out that John had been divorced since January 2021. He had 3 children who lived with his ex-wife in the state of Texas, USA. And the most suspicious thing, John left Colombia on the day Valentina's body was discovered. John closed all his social media pages, disconnected his phone, and the police could not contact him. These questionable actions made him the prime suspect in the case. John was put on a manhunt, and a $4,500 reward was put out for him. The police were able to track his movements, and it turned out that he had flown to Panama. At the request of the Panama police, along with Interpol, apprehended John at the airport. He had his plane tickets with him. John was attempting to fly to Istanbul and was headed to Montenegro. He was extradited to Colombia as early as January 26th. There were scratches on his face that looked like defensive wounds. An autopsy on Valentina's body showed that the cause of death was strangulation. She had been beaten before her death. She had severe head injuries and bruises on her face. Valentina died an agonizing death, presumably on Saturday, January 21st. Investigators began to find out what happened in the last days and hours of Valentine and John's lives. On January 19th, 2023, John returned to Colombia after another business trip to the United States. He had rented an apartment in an upscale complex for only 4 days. He didn't intend to be in the country for long. On January 20th, 2023, John rented a gray Volkswagen Voyage car to drive around Bogota and transported Valentina to his apartment. She was last seen on the evening of Friday, January 20th, 2023, at a nightclub with John. She was working there as a DJ. Valentina sent messages to her family that she would be playing at the Nexus nightclub on Friday and Saturday, but she was not at work on Saturday. Police requested CCTV footage from the nightclub, apartment, airport, and near where the body was found to verify everything. Investigators were able to locate the cameras, which allowed them to track all of his movements. Police immediately noticed the blue suitcase with which John flew to Colombia and checked into the apartment on January 19th. Valentina's body was found in the same suitcase. On the morning of January 20th, John brought her back to his apartment. Valentina moved in with his belongings. She had a small red suitcase and bags with her. They left the apartment together several times that day and came back together. In the evening, John accompanied Valentina to a performance at a nightclub. After the club, they returned safely to the apartment at night. On the morning of January 21st, they were caught on camera. Valentina never left the apartment again. John was the last person to see her alive. The coroner believes Valentina was killed at that time. What went on behind the closed doors of that apartment is unknown. At 10 a.m. Sunday, January 22nd, John hurriedly left the apartment with his suitcases. First, he took out the blue suitcase covered with a blanket. He moved it on a cart because there was apparently a body in the suitcase, and it was heavy. John drove the cart to the car, loaded the suitcase into the car with difficulty, and then returned to the apartment, took other things, including Valentina's red suitcase, loaded them into the car, and drove away. John then drove the car all over town. Apparently, he was looking for a good place to dispose of the suitcases. Then his car showed up at the dumpster where they found the suitcase with the body, and there he got rid of the stuff. That neighborhood was quite quiet, secluded, and was also close to the airport, which is why John chose that location. Then he headed to the airport and flew out of the country to Panama to fly from there via Turkey to Montenegro, which was his final destination. Montenegro is a country that does not have an extradition agreement with Colombia, so he chose that particular destination. But John didn't make the flight. He had $7,000 in cash and cards with him. It turned out he still had tickets in hand for Sao Paulo, Brazil, but he didn't check in for that flight. Detectives believed that was his way of confusing police. The police managed to find a cab driver who gave the couple a ride home at night after the disco. He said that Valentina, before boarding the car near the club, told the driver that she had sent a message by mistake in the cab app and showed him the text. "Help, I'm in danger," the driver asked in response. "This isn't a joke. Are you okay?" Just then, John approached them, and Valentina immediately went silent. John stepped into the conversation and began carefully hugging Valentina, telling her they were fine, trying to calm her down. Valentina told the cab driver, "It's not a mistake." The driver began to ask what was wrong, and John abruptly cut him off without giving him a chance to ask Valentina what was going on. The couple then got into the cab and spoke in English. The cabbie didn't understand anything. The couple, according to the cabbie, seemed fine. They had had a few drinks, but were not drunk. The arrested John claimed he was innocent. He blamed it all on the cartel. Allegedly, they set John up, and he had to flee the country. He claimed his life was in danger. But no one believed this version. CCTV footage near the apartment showed that no strangers had entered the apartment. The couple were alone in the apartment, and only he came out of it. There were no signs of forced entry in the apartment, and also his version did not explain in any way why he took the suitcase with Valentina's body and got rid of it. The police believe the motive for the crime is John's jealousy of Valentina. It turns out that John had hired a private investigator who had been following her lately. He became obsessed with Valentina, constantly calling her on video calls and checking to see who she was with. A friend of Valentina's who was with her that night on January 20th at the club said that Valentina was very upset and complained to her about John, who had hired a man to follow her. John had informed Valentina himself before the show, and she was scared. John had been following her all evening, and she was uncomfortable with it. John supported Valentina financially, although she was earning quite well herself. He gave her money for cosmetic procedures, for shopping, for vacations and considered her his property. She did not like it. Recently, Valentina began to distance herself from him, and he felt it, but did not want to let her go. After studying Valentina's correspondence with her friend, the police found out that she complained to her that she had fallen out of love with him. She didn't want to be with him, and John insisted on a wedding she didn't want. Valentina believed that they weren't right for each other because of the large age difference of 12 years. The private investigator learned that Valentina was still seeing another guy named Santiago Luna while John was traveling. She traveled with him. Valentina had been in a romantic relationship with Santiago since November 2022. Apparently, this information reached John and triggered the rage that caused him to kill Valentina. She had a sense of what was in store for her that night, which is why she asked the cab driver for help, but John interrupted her. John was charged with Valentina's murder and hiding the body. On January 28th, a preliminary hearing was held, at which John's lawyer continued to insist that the defendant had been unlawfully seized at the airport. His rights were violated, and he was also inconvenienced. John was placed in tight handcuffs that caused him painful sensations, but the judge dismissed this complaint. The defendant continues to deny guilt and considers himself a victim who was framed. John laughed during the hearing and was reprimanded by the judge for doing so. The prosecution believes that John planned everything in advance, and that is why he only rented the apartment for 4 days and promised the girl that they were moving in together for a long time. In the apartment, there was a quarrel between them because of Valentina's secret affair with another guy. John beat the girl and strangled her, and later took her body in a suitcase and threw it in the trash. John Paulos is being held in a private cell in Bogota prison. Now all that remains is to legally demonstrate that all this evidence links a man to the crime and to find out what the motive was for this horrific murder. In Colombia, the penal code provides for barely up to 50 years in prison for the crime of which John is accused. What do you think about this story? Share your opinion in the comments. Thanks for watching and for being with me. Take care of yourself and your loved ones.